Welcome to Hope Academy. My name is Mr. O, and today I'm going to be going over specifically numbers 22 through 24 on the CrackSAT exam. The link is provided below in case you want to access this exam, but I am going over specifically numbers 22 to 24. If you want to watch prior videos, I already covered the prior questions. Usually when I do these type of questions, I go over them real quick and then I explain in depth how to do the question. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for number 22, what's the length of the major axis of the ellipse given by this equation? Okay, so I'm going to need a calculator for this. Okay. So my final answer for number 22 is going to be C. And now I'm going to explain to you how to do this question. So for this specific concept, the important concept you need to understand for this is the concept on ellipse. I do want to note that when I think about ellipse, it has the exact same properties as a circle in many ways, except for the dimensionality aspect. But that being stated, ellipse does share a lot of the properties of a circle. And now I'm going to explain to you around this concept of ellipse and how I was able to apply this concept of the ellipse to this problem. So in this question, it states that x squared over 10 plus y squared over 20 equals to 1. Most of the times when we're dealing with circles or ellipses, we have to make the assumption that this value right here, and I'm going to use a different color, this value right here is going to represent the r squared, and this value also right here is going to represent r squared. But the difference, the significant difference between these two values is the fact that this r squared in the blue represents specifically the radius, quote unquote, the radius measurement for the x-axis, while in the brown, the r squared will be representative of the radius specifically for the y-axis. And before you can even do anything with the circle or ellipses based questions, in which circle will usually have these two values the same, while ellipses will have two different values, the important thing you need to make sure is that this value on the right here is 1. If the value on the right is not 1, you cannot do anything or find out anything about the dimensionalities, the center, or anything about this ellipse. But that being stated, since there is nothing on the x and y, automatically there is no the center is at 0, 0, but that's not relevant to this particular question. It asks me what is the measurement of the major axis. And this is only relevant to ellipses. And when we're working with specifically major axis, we want to look at the bigger value because the major means the bigger value. And so if we look at x and y, specifically the blue and brown, the brown value is going to be the bigger value. And so right off, the first thing I did was I looked for r. And the way I did that was basically thinking that r squared equals to 20. So I need to square root both sides and find out what the square root of 20 would be. And on the calculator, when I solved it on the TID9 right here, I found that the r equals to 4.47214. Okay, but that does not finish my question, because what I basically found, and if I was to provide a little sketch of how this sort of looks like, right now you have an ellipsis right here. The major axis is represented by this whole thing, okay? And what I found so far with this 4.472, which I'm going to show in brown right here, this 4.472, I basically found the measurement of this piece right here. But be aware, it only found the radius, not quote unquote what we'll call right now the diameter of this whole thing. To find the diameter, simply I just need to do this 4.47214 times 2. This will equal to my major axis measurement. And thus how I ended up with a value of 8.94427 on the calculator. That would be my answer for this question. But that being stated, the answer choices end up showing that they're pretty rounded off, and thus how I got the answer 8.9, which will conclude my explanation for number 22. And to continue on to the next question, sorry for the little smudge, but if f of x equals to this, which is greater integer is equal to this, okay, which of following is that? Okay, well, I'm going to write that again. And f of x equals to this. Okay, that's the only important thing. Okay, so looking at the possible choices, this won't perfectly fit on screen, so I'm just going to be looking at the answer choices below too. Okay, so if I choose, okay, it'll still be 1. If I 2 is a value like 0.25, 1 minus 1 will be 0. It's not going to be E. Not going to be D. It's not going to be E. So I think that's out. What's the difference? Oh, okay. So for my final answer for number 23, my final answer for this question will be C. And now I'm going to explain to you how I was able to get to this answer. So for number 23, it is a bit big, so I wasn't able to show all the possible options or answers on this question. But that being stated, you could look it online if you need to see them specifically. But the question basically states a scenario where they use this bracket x, and they say that this bracket x is the greatest integer less than or equal to x, which is the following when we do the function of x minus 2, x divided by 2 minus 1. And the best way to approach this question is by plugging in specific values. So I mental math some values. So for example, I plugged in like 2.5 divided by 2 minus 1. And I knew that it would be a function of, like, let's say 1.25 minus 1. And thus, because the bracket rule states that it has to be the greatest integer less than or equal to x, 1.25, the greatest integer less than or equal to, will be 1. And so this value becomes 1 minus 1, which equals to 0. And so I ended up doing was a process of elimination. I went through the choices looking for basically where my x value, if it's 2.5, it will still be 1. I mean 0. So when I found 2.5, this one's not 0. Okay, A is not it. I looked at C, is not going to be it. And I kept looking through the answer choices to figure out what would be the possible options. And then if, let's say you're left with 2, just plug in another possible value that will prove whether one or the other will work. And thus how I ended up with the answer B. Because when I plug in 2.5 into this one, it confirms that it will be the value 0. And you could test a few more points if needed, but for me, I was able to solve this question quicker just because I already sort of understood the idea or the image behind it, and thus how I was able to get to the answer B. And that concludes my explanation for number 23. And to continue on to the last question, so for number 24. So number 24 states this: which of the following is equal to the positive value of this? Okay. So this question is going to be a calculator question. So it's a radians, okay. 3527. Okay. Secant 1 divided by cosine. Answer 2.83. So 5. So number 24, my final answer is D. And now I'm going to explain to you how you are able to do this question. So for number 24, this one's most easiest while doing it on the calculator. Your calculator has all the functionalities needed. So including the inverse cosine symbol, which I did on the TID9, it should be existent even on scientific calculators or TID3/84. But the idea behind it is that first I made sure it was in radian format, just because I don't know if it's radian or degree, but I don't think in the end it will affect the answer. But in the end, I punched in cosine inverse of this, ended up getting this value first. So I ended up getting the value actually no, that is the final answer. 1.21034 will be this value. Afterwards, I took secant of 1.21034, and if you don't have that function on your calculator, like I didn't want to look for it, so I actually punched in 1 over cosine 1.21034, which is just a very simple trigonometry terminology where cosine equals to 1 over secant or secant equals to 1 over cosine, and thus I punched in 1 over cosine 1.21034, ended up with 2.835, which is rounded off in this answer to D, which is 2.84. And that concludes my explanation for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter so that we could continue to make content like this. I hope you have a wonderful day.